You're listening to The Foundation of Wellness, a refreshing take on diet and lifestyle, with Jessica Dogert, a registered dietitian nutritionist, and Marisa Moon, a Primal health coach.
Hey there, guys. It's me, Marisa Moon, and I'm a certified Primal health coach. I'm an intermittent fasting instructor, and I help busy adults who are totally sick of dieting to fall in love with a healthier lifestyle so that becomes a part of who they really are, and so that dieting becomes a thing of the past and they can forget about it. Inside my course, Intermittent Fasting Freedom, I walk people through the steps that it takes to adopt intermittent fasting as a way of life, but one that's totally flexible and fun and effective, of course. I mean, who wants anything to do with another diet that doesn't give you results? No one, right? And you can learn more about my method at marisamoon.com/ifreedom. So here we are already in August, and before you know it, we're going to be eyeballing Halloween and Thanksgiving around the corner. I know you wish I didn't even say that, but the truth is that summer is flying by as usual, and you might be realizing you've let yet another year pass by without making changes in your diet that actually stuck this time. Changes that got you real results and made you feel good and can last a lifetime. I decided that this week was a great time to share with you a topic I call Cutting Carbs in 4 Steps. Why and how to start carb moderation. You know, I created this talk for the Habits to Thrive Summit, which is a free online summit where you'll learn all about creating sustainable habits that can literally transform your health. And we're doing another summit again this fall, the same one, but with different speakers, different topics. So be sure that you sign up for this free online event, and you can find it at bit.ly/habits to thrive. That's bit.ly/habits to thrive. I really love talking on the topic of carbohydrate moderation because it's one of my core beliefs as a health coach, and it's easier and more enjoyable than most people think, especially when you don't have to cut carbs like freakishly low like you do on the keto diet. What I'm diving into today is going to be extremely valuable information. I'm not afraid to say that because just understanding these fundamental concepts about what you're eating will help you begin to turn dieting into a lifestyle that you love. You really will love it. It just has to be something that you invite into your life. Now, over the next maybe 15, 20 minutes, you're going to discover the reasons that you feel like you're destined for a lifetime of constant dieting and exactly how you can start taking manageable steps towards a diet that's more optimal for your health and for your body. I want to guide you through instinctual carb moderation that can help free you from endless dieting for good. So turn up the volume, turn off all your other distractions, and get serious here. This information could finally bring you the change you've been chasing after for long enough. Now, just like you, I have tried all the dieting books and the programs out there. Believe it or not, I have. I've been really into health and wellness since I was about 19 or 20, and I gained 15 pounds, and I didn't like who I saw in pictures. I was exercising my butt off at the gym, wondering what I must be doing wrong. Why was it so hard to keep the weight off? And I used to always stress about getting back on my diet. You probably feel me. I mean, what if I told you, though, that it's not a diet or a new workout routine that you need to end this madness? It's a major reality check that you need, a restart button. I'm talking about a foundational healthy diet that makes so much sense, one that's so awesome and so rewarding that you never want to stop eating that way. We're going to get there. Hang with me. It all begins with a reality check. How hard are you making your body work to keep up with the foods you're eating? How often are you giving your body a break from digesting food all the time? And what kind of food does your body expect you to eat to begin with? We've been trained to believe that a healthy diet is made up of whole grains and low-fat foods and low-calorie foods, And that an ideal eating strategy is to always have 3 meals a day at very ritualistic meal times and always snacking in between, making sure not to go more than 2 hours without a snack. But this doesn't really make sense when we look back on the ways humans have eaten for most of our existence on this planet. I love sharing concepts inspired by ancestral health or the influences from our ancient ancestors because this type of wisdom helps us to end the confusion about what's healthy today. Now, historically, humans cycled between times of feasting and times when they were really deprived of food. Ancient humans ate 1 actual meal a day most times because food gathering and preparation took so long in those days. Now here we are eating 3 to 6 meals a day, and the human body was designed to thrive on much less food, much less often. And think about those caveman days, right? Unsuccessful hunting trips, searching for food and not finding any. Changes in the season, such as winters or droughts, would mean people were going long periods without any food. And still, the human species just grew stronger and continued to prevail. Our human genes actually prefer this fragmented eating pattern combined with wild natural foods. Yeah, big surprise. Our body's not destined for processed foods, but these are things that we have to really stare in the face and accept. That's why it's a reality check. Life's a lot different today, right? We don't typically have to worry about food scarcity. Thankfully, most of us will never have to experience that. But in recent decades even, it was normal to go 8 hours between meals or 12 hours without food between your dinner and the first meal of the next day. I mean, that's what it was like for our grandparents, right? There weren't any late night options, no drive-thrus or endless snacks and convenience stores and gas stations with treats everywhere. I mean, for most of our existence on this planet, those things did not exist. Now, starting in 1977, the USDA published dietary guidelines that suggested that we eat a higher carbohydrate diet and one that's also lower in fat. And we were advised to increase our meal frequency so that we were snacking in between our meals. These are big changes that influence all matters of our metabolism, what kind of nutrients we're taking in our diet, and our energy levels. That's why we had to eat so often so our energy doesn't just plummet. So by 2003, our diets consisted of breads and crackers and convenience food and lots of low-calorie and low-fat snacks in between all of these sandwiches and all of these meals, and we're eating 6 times a day. This means that our body is always processing food. It's always working hard to shuttle the sugar and the carbohydrates out of our bloodstream and always working hard to digest what's in our stomachs. So what happens when we're constantly eating? Our body is busy digesting constantly. That's a very energy-demanding process that can continue for hours or even days at a time to finish digesting every component of that meal. And when we're constantly eating, that also means our body is constantly producing insulin. Have you ever heard of the hormone called insulin? This is a super duper important hormone that most of us only hear of when someone's talking about diabetes. Well, insulin matters for all of us so much because it holds the key to the fat that's already in your fat stores. It matters for dozens of other reasons that affect our health in major ways, but I have a hunch that you want to hear about the one that controls your body fat. Here's how insulin basically works in response to what we eat. When we consume carbs, protein too, but especially carbs, our blood sugar concentration goes up. Then our pancreas releases this hormone called insulin. And insulin helps shuttle the sugar from our bloodstream into our cells and to convert it in our liver so that we can store it in our tissues as glycogen, stored energy in the form of sugar and carbs. Now, there's very limited storage space in our tissues for this type of energy, which is why anything extra gets stored as fat. There's no more room left to store all of those excess carbs you've been eating, but there's always room for more body fat. Interesting how the body was designed that way. And during this entire process, the fat that's stored on our body cannot be burned because insulin stops it from happening. You would have to run out of all your stored glycogen, stop producing more insulin, or stop eating, in other words, in order for your body fat to even stand a chance at being burned. Now, when we eat carbs and sugar often enough to create chronically elevated blood sugar, the cells in our body resist insulin, and the body just keeps pumping out more insulin because it's trying to get your blood sugar back down how it's supposed to be. Side note, when you hear me say carbs, I mean sugar, and when you hear me say sugar, I mean carbs, because the carbs you consume are converted to sugar in the body and they're both stored as glycogen. Same thing. Now, excess sugar in the bloodstream is toxic. That's why insulin plays such a huge role in our body. It runs the show. Everything stops so the body can take care of that sugar in your bloodstream first. So here we are with chronically high blood sugar, like most Americans, because we eat bread and crackers and flour-based foods and sweet stuff all day long, every single day. It doesn't matter if it's whole grains or low fat, none of that matters. Our body is constantly pumping more and more insulin to try and handle the problem. But your cells aren't listening. They're resisting insulin. This is called insulin resistance, which is a surefire way to get type 2 diabetes. It's often called prediabetes. And nearly 1 out of 2 adults today in America have diabetes or prediabetes or are insulin resistant, and many of them don't even know it. Insulin resistance is bad. Every health professional agrees with that across the board. Can't deny it. Insulin resistance promotes weight gain and increases your risk not only of obesity and diabetes, the most obvious ones, but also heart disease, cancer, kidney disease, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, all different autoimmune diseases, depression even, all sorts of pain and inflammation, Alzheimer's disease, and more. Now, the only way to prevent such catastrophes with your health and constant weight gain and fat storing is to adopt a more natural intake of carbs and sugar to begin with. It's pretty clear what a natural intake of carbs and sugar is when we look throughout most of human history. We got to think about what the earth designed us humans to eat when there weren't civilizations and farms and factories and processed foods. Humans would eat whatever they could gather in the forest or hunt or fish for in the wild. They couldn't even farm during those times because they never stayed long enough in one place. And when winters came, they would eat foods that they preserved or dried, and they would go in and out of times of fasting because food was scarce. But when the agricultural revolution occurred thousands of years ago, humans started to grow food as a community for the first time ever in history. Now, during this time, we started growing acres and acres of grains because they were cheap and quick to grow, and we could feed so many people. But this changed everything, including our intake of nutritious foods, because we didn't have to depend on the food that we can hunt or gather in the wild. We just ate lots of grains and less varieties of food altogether. Now, once the Industrial Revolution hit and factories could make flour from grains and ship it by the bagful, then flour and processed foods became readily available and at a cheap price. It became so easy and so cheap to make food out of flour and out of grains, the American staple commodity crops. So what's really wrong with that? Well, everything about our nutrient intake changed. Here's an interesting way to look at this whole situation we have with bread and grains in our diet. Did you know that in the old days, bread was a food for the poor? Our distant relatives even, and our ancient ancestors, of course, knew that this was not a nourishing food. So it was used to feed the starving and the needy and the masses, but not as a primary food source for the strong and the resilient. Bread was eaten out of desperation for the masses. Sure, in some cases it was treated like an artisanal delicacy because bread and pastry making is a fine skill and considered an art form. But even in this case, it was never a dietary staple. The reason this matters is because humans thrived and our genes evolved on a diet that was made up of vegetables and fruits and tuber-type vegetables and nuts and seafood and meat for millions of years until flour was mass-produced by farms and factories. So let's think about bread making for a minute. This section might ring a bell if you've listened to episode number 7 about cutting out sugar and carbs. Bread making, okay, truly from scratch, like beginning to end, from the seeds in the fields, maybe even hulled seeds to make it into white flour and more shelf stable. And then you'd grind those seeds into a flour. You'd make the dough. Then you'd allow it to ferment and proof like sourdough, which is the traditional method of preservation, and then you'd bake it, let it cool. Baking is a long process. Bread should be a food for celebration, is what I'm getting at after all that work. It's not a food that we should have at every meal. I like to look at it like, if you're not willing to make your bread or your pasta or other flour-based foods from scratch as often as you're eating it, then that's your flashing sign that this food is actually a treat, not something intended to be eaten on a daily basis, let alone with every single meal. Without factories and preservatives to keep our flour and breads shelf stable, there's no way the entire population could consume them daily. So let's think together. What are our favorite, most addicting foods made from flour that are preventing you from losing weight and feeling good and getting adequate nutrition from your diet? Well, what comes to mind for me are crusty breads, bagels, crackers, cereals, sandwich rolls like you use on subs and beef sandwiches and hot dog buns, pizza, of course, and pasta. And then there's cookies and cupcakes, cake, donuts, pancakes, French toast, waffles. Oh, mac and cheese, can't forget that. So much more, you guys. These flour-based foods are every which way we turn because they're cheap to make, they're cheap to buy, and they're totally addicting. Even though factories and machines can make it for us, and it's cheap, and it's readily available, and we love it so much we're addicted, we have to look at it like we look at sugar or alcohol. These foods are treats. They were never intended as a staple of the human diet, and our bodies literally can't keep up with our intake. Remember what we were talking about insulin? Well, too much insulin and blood sugar surges has a lot to do with your appetite, your cravings, your mood, and your energy or your lack of energy, and of course, your body weight. In fact, there are hundreds of thought leaders in the field of medicine and health who believe that by just keeping our insulin levels low most of the time, we'd be living way longer lives, healthier lives, keeping an ideal weight, and living without so much pain or disease risk, and having a healthy brain even when we get super old. So how do we keep our insulin levels as low and steady as possible? By moderating your carb intake. And lucky for all of us, this same strategy is what will help free you from a lifetime of weight gain and constant dieting. Ready? Here are 4 steps to help get you started on this ideal path towards better health and a foundational diet that makes sense, feels good, keeps the weight off, and tastes awesome. Step 1. Get realistic with your current carb intake so you can start adjusting accordingly. This means you're going to start turning your food packages around and looking at the label. How many grams of carbohydrates are in that food per serving size that you're really eating? Take a look at the grams of sugar too. You might even consider tracking your carbohydrates and your sugar for a few days just to get a realistic point of reference. How much are you really taking in a day? I like this app called Carbs Control. Step 2. Adjust your carbs to a more ideal range per day, which is between 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrates a day. This can vary based on a lot of things like your size and your goals, your physical activity, and your current state of health. A health coach or dietitian can help you select a range that's more ideal for someone like you, but a healthy range for most adults, even if you're working out, is between 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrates per day. And when you cut back on carbohydrates, you have to up your intake of colorful vegetables. I'm talking about vegetables at every single meal. And you have to up your quality fats. That's major. This is going to make you feel satisfied. Olive oil, grass-fed butter, avocados, and nuts. And you're going to have to be sure you're eating protein at every single meal. And guess what all this means? You're shopping for more fresh groceries. You're putting a little bit more time into planning your meals and cooking them. There's no escaping that. Unless you got all the extra money to throw around to have everything delivered to you and all your meals made for you, you're going to be going to the grocery store more often, buying fresh foods, and cooking more. And the foods you eat are going to be in a bowl a lot more often instead of between 2 slices of bread. That's right, I even eat my burger in a bowl or on a plate without the bun. Making this switch and looking at mealtime differently is where most people need hand-holding. I get it. It's not an easy switch to make. Like in my online course, Intermittent Fasting Freedom, we take 21 days together to rethink mealtime and come up with all the different ways to build your plate without carbs and to work through those mental blocks and the obstacles that are in your life standing in your way of cutting carbs for good. I created food lists for everyone. They list my favorite carb swaps. I show photos of my favorite meals and so much more to make this a lot easier. So if you're serious about taking these steps to end dieting and reach your ideal weight, you'd be saving yourself a lot of time and aggravation if you had a coach to help you. More on that at marisamoon.com/ifreedom. But if you're ready to tackle this on your own, the next step is going to help you. We're still on step 2 though. Just start aiming for under 150 grams of carbs per day and try to get that going for at least 21 days. Because it takes approximately 21 days of reduced carb intake to start resetting your metabolism and to teach your body how to use stored body fat instead of carbs and sugar for energy. Step 3. This makes step 2 easier and more effective. Step 3 is to hone in on your tripwires like dessert habits, sweetened drinks, and fast food. These things are derailing you constantly. A great place to start is to try a method that I use called Are You an Abstainer or a Moderator? This framework was created by Gretchen Rubin. She's an author and a happiness and habits expert. And this framework is designed to open your eyes to the fact that it may not be realistic for you to eat certain foods in moderation. But other foods you can eat in moderation, and then these other ones you're losing control every time you eat them. That's me with French fries. So I'm offering you one of my favorite worksheets that I use inside my course. It always gets my clients into this major wow moment because it's so revealing. This worksheet helps you see which carb-based foods are making you spin out of control and which ones help you feel satisfied. Which ones can you keep in your life and eat in moderation? So go ahead and grab this awesome freebie. You can download it at marisamoon.com/abstain-freebie. Now remember, if you're a soda drinker, regular or diet soda, that's a great place to start too. You're going to have to stop the sugary sweetened drinks, even diet like sugar-free energy drinks. Yep, they got to go. And we've summarized all the top ways to cut that habit in episode number 33. It's called Why and How to Quit a Soda Pop Habit on the podcast. Step 4. The final step comes when you get into a rhythm of a healthier carb intake. When it's been around 10 to 21 days, depending on the person, you've been optimizing your carb intake this long, and you're going to notice you're able to go longer between your meals without any snacks. And at this stage, you should be able to go at least 12 hours overnight between your last bite of dinner and the bite of breakfast the following day. That would mean you stop eating after dinner, let's say you finish at 8 p.m., no nighttime snacking or dessert, and you don't eat again until 8 a.m. the following day when it's been 12 hours. This is a beginner level of intermittent fasting that by now you've probably heard about, but this type of intermittent fasting that's very minimal is what I believe all adults should strive for at the bare minimum so that your body can work on fighting disease while you're sleeping and optimizing your energy and your metabolism and keeping you young like it's supposed to be doing while you sleep. So there we go. How about it? 4 steps. Plenty of you to work with. Head over to marisamoon.com/abstain-freebie so you can get that download and see which carbs spin you out of control and start taking action. I've given you plenty of things to think about, and you can be well on your way to less dieting and more energy, right? You'll find a summary of these steps on my blog at marisamoon.com/blog/53. And get in touch with us on social media. You'll find our social media links in the show notes and all of the links I've mentioned as well. And the show notes you can find on your audio player that you're listening to right now, usually just scrolling up as this episode is playing. But you can always go to our podcast homepage at tinyurl.com/FOW home. It's all lowercase FOW home. You know FOW stands for Foundation of Wellness. So let me know, what did you discover in that worksheet? Are you an abstainer or a moderator? What did you learn? I can't wait to find out. And we'll see you next week when we dive into the autoimmune protocol and cooking for allergen-free diets with the pro herself, Mickey Trescott. This is a huge one. Her new book just came out. It's a cookbook called The Nutrient Dense Kitchen. Can't wait. Bye.